So, like every month, at the end of every month, we have town hall meetings, and quite often, you often talk about like how important it is for us to like the school's coordination with the regulatory bodies, and so like almost every town hall, even the previous one, the safety meeting, you briefly spoke about your coordination with the CAA as well. So, could you maybe provide just like a specific example of how this has worked in practice? And when you're working with the regulators as well, what sort of obstacles do you encounter whenever you uh, try and coordinate with them?
Yeah, sure. Look, let me give you an example. And regulators, the first thing is to be respectful and honest with them. They have an innate ability to sense if you're lying, because they see so much and they experience so much. And so you have to be very honest, and you put the context, your context, the way you see the world around what you're doing. Now, just after I started, one of the the major challenges I had is that the regulator determined that there were 3 or 4 aircraft, they weren't quite sure whether it was 3 or 4, that potentially were not compliant with all of the rules relating to maintenance. And you think piloting, becoming a pilot is complex. Well, you've got the same sort of complexity sitting over in the engineering environment. So they came to me and they said, and it was 9 pages, and they walked in and they sat down and gave me a 9-page letter of all of the issues. And basically they said to me, well, you have a choice. You can ground them or we ground them. And really there is no choice. What it is about is how you recover from that grounding. There's a massive choice in terms of how you as a business take ownership. And one of the things that I always do with regulators is say, we will take ownership of the problems. We created them. We've put you in this invidious position. Now we have to sort it out, and we will come back to you and seek acceptance from you of what we're doing. Do you think I was happy or pleased about having to do that? No, of course not, because it meant 4 aircraft sitting on the ground, whereas I'd much rather be flying them and earning some money. But the reality is it was a massive learning curve in terms of regulator expectations. The regulators are always clear in terms of what their expectations are. The problem that they have is putting into context around your business. And that's where we as business managers come in. We have to be skilled communicators. We have to be very clear communicators. We have to work with our team to understand what the end objective is, which is, in this case, getting the aircraft back into the air. But we have to understand what all of the concerns were of the regulator. Because inevitably, while we may think they are not valid, through my long experience of working with them, there is always some learning and some validity in what they have suggested to you. And it's really about how we as a business accept the challenges, and then how we communicate those challenges to our students. Our students have to understand why we are running the business the way they are, why we are running the business the way we are, and also what it means for them. Because sometimes it doesn't mean such great news for them, but you have to communicate it. You have to be very authentic in your communications. You have to be honest with them. Because one of the things I have found in general in business is as soon as you hoodwink somebody or you pull the wool over your eyes, a very New Zealand term, you start to compromise not only your personal ethics, but the ethics of the people in the business and the business itself. And then you start to run into some really, really major difficulties. Now, everyone knew that it was my decision to ground the aircraft. That's the easy part. The easy part was done. The issue then becomes, how do you provide assurance to all of your stakeholders that when these aircraft go back and operate again, that in fact they are compliant or they meet all of the standards. And that is quite in the engineering rating, it is quite intensive. And there are multiple levels of assurance having to be provided. At one point, last year, the engineers assured me that something was good to go. And normally you would say, yeah, that's great, but that's where your understanding and knowledge of the regulator and how regulators think about systems comes in. And I said, well, actually, I require assurance from the original engine manufacturer, because they are the most experienced with this particular engine. And they came back and recommended a different course of action. Now, that to me speaks volumes about the way you think about regulators and the systems that they manage. Generally, they're right, but you have to take ownership of how you solve the problems.
Okay.
And you have to be respectful, obviously.